I'm very excited to introduce our next moderator, my classmate and my dearest friend who's been there for me through the thick and thin, Keoni Williams. Keoni is a third-year student here at the William S. Richardson School of Law. Last summer, he served as a Patsy T. Mink Fellow in the Washington, D.C. office of Congressman Kahele. Keoni is also a graduate degree fellow at the East-West Center and editor-in-chief of our sister journal, Apple PJ, Asian Pacific Law and Policy Journal. We especially appreciate him for being here today as he's getting ready for Apple PJ's own symposium happening in 2 weeks. Take it away, Keoni.
Thank you, Suhyeon. Can you hear me? I just want to double check my sound. Good? Okay, great. Aloha, everyone. So our panel is on the legacy of Patsy Mink and Title IX. Before I introduce our distinguished panelists, I would just like to offer up a quote by Patsy Mink that she gave in 2002, just a few months before she passed. It was given at the 30th anniversary celebration of Title IX. And in her speech, she said, "Let us rededicate ourselves to the goals of dignity, equality, and opportunity for all that characterized our dreams for Title IX 30 years ago. These goals are every bit as worthy and important today in 2002 as they were in 1972. And I just wanted to say that first because I think in many ways, that's the banner under which we gather as a panel here today, to rededicate ourselves to the goals of dignity, equality, and opportunity for all. And that the vision of Title IX is every bit as worthy and important for today in 2023 as it was at the 30th anniversary of Title IX, and also on June 23rd, 1972, when 50 years ago, President Nixon signed it into law. And so just on that note, I'd like to begin with introducing our distinguished panel. I'll start off with Representative Linda Ichiyama. So great to have you with us. Representative Linda Ichiyama represents House District 31, which includes Salt Lake, Fort Shafter Flats, and Pearl Harbor. She was elected into office in 2010, currently serves as the chair on the Water and Land Committee, is a member of the Committee on Corrections, Military, and Veterans, and the Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs. She is also one of 4 conveners of the Bipartisan Women's Legislative Caucus. Representative Ichiyama is a proud graduate of Moanalua High School, Georgetown University, and the William S. Richardson School of Law here at the University of Hawaiʻi at Manoa. She is active in the local community through a number of organizations, including the Hawaii JCs, the Moanalua Lions Club, the Japanese American Citizens League, and the Honolulu Community Action Program. Welcome, Rep. Ichiyama. Up next, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Leslie Kobayashi. She was nominated by President Barack Obama on April 22nd, 2010, and confirmed by the United States Senate as a United States District Judge in the District of Hawaii on December 22nd, 2010. Judge Kobayashi previously served as a magistrate judge up till 2010 in the District of Hawaii and practiced civil and commercial litigation for 16 years. She received her bachelor's degree from Wellesley College in 1979 and her JD from Boston College School of Law in 1983. She has served as a presiding judge of the reentry program, helped to establish the Kapilipono pilot program, which is an alternatives to incarceration program, and presides as judge for the Restorative Justice Circle program and Lokahi Court, which is a program for individuals who are at high risk for recidivism for the District Court of Hawaii. She also serves as the Ninth Circuit's District Judge Representative to the Judicial Conference of the United States and the Ninth Circuit Jury Instructions Committee. Welcome, Judge Kobayashi. Up next, Justice Sabrina McKenna is a 1978 graduate of the University of Hawaiʻi at Manoa, where she was a beneficiary of Title IX as a scholarship recipient on the Wahine basketball team. Also a 1982 graduate of the William S. Richardson School of Law. I'd like to note that she's authoring a forthcoming essay on Title IX entitled Transgender Women in College Athletics, the Next Era of Title IX. After graduating, she worked as a civil litigator, corporate counsel, and law professor. She was appointed to the State District Court in 1993 and the Circuit Court in 1995. She has been serving as an Associate Justice of the Hawaiʻi Supreme Court since 2011 and has chaired the Hawaiʻi Supreme Court's Committee on Equality and Access to the Courts. Some of her many honors include the American Bar Association's Stonewall Award, the National Asian American Bar Association's Daniel K. Inouye Trailblazer Award, the Hawaii Friends for Civil Rights Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Friends Award, UHM Distinguished Alumnus Award, and the Hawaii Women Lawyers Outstanding Judicial Achievement Award. And as someone that I have externed for, I have the utmost respect and admiration for Justice McKenna. So welcome, Justice McKenna. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce Ms. Marilyn Moniz. She served as the Associate Athletics Director and Senior Women Administrator for the University of Hawaiʻi Athletics Program for nearly 30 years, where she oversaw 10 sports programs for both men and women. In this role, Ms. Moniz was responsible for the athletics department's compliance and eligibility, student affairs, academics, and student athlete development. In 2021, Ms. Moniz was inducted to the American Volleyball Coaches Association's Hall of Fame. And Ms. Moniz represented the University of Hawaii at the National Collegiate Athletic Association and the Big West Conference alongside the athletic director. She started working for the University of Hawaii Athletics Department in 1989. And before joining the department, she held positions as the Directors of Parks and Recreation for the County of Maui, and also served as Deputy Prosecuting Attorney for the County of Maui. Ms. Moniz received her BA in American Studies from the University of Hawaii at Manoa and in 1976, and then her JD from the William S. Richardson School of Law in 1979. So pleased to have all of you distinguished panelists with us. Thank you so much, and also to our audience for staying on. I know our panel is what stands between us and the weekend, and for our law students watching, it stands between us and spring break. So we will try our very best to stick to our 1 hour and allow our wonderful co-editors-in-chiefs to wrap us up for the day on time. But since I started with a quote to the panelists that kind of talked about Patsy Mink as a congresswoman, I would like to pose to, first of all, to all of our panelists, a question about her legacy. And so this is to all panelists. When Patsy T. Mink was elected, there were only 11 women in the House of Representatives and no other women of color in Congress. So my question for all of you is, how has the legacy of Patsy Mink influenced and inspired your legal careers? If anyone wants to break the ice.
I'll go.
Thank you.
Because I think Patsy Mink has been inspiring me for the longest, because I think I'm the oldest. I'm not quite sure, right, Sabrina? And I just appreciate this opportunity to speak about her because she really set the path for my life. She and Dr. Donis Thompson. So though I walk in Donis's shoes, I walked in her shoes, Patsy Mink was my inspiration and my role model since I went to the University of Hawaii in 1972. No coincidence. And I've had many touch points with Patsy along the way during my time at the university playing volleyball and doing my career at the university. So I'm forever indebted to her and the work she did when she went to Congress the first time and when she went to Congress the second time. and continue to labor on behalf of all of us, the people of Hawaii, in achieving equity in all different areas and including Title IX, because we were still under attack within athletics in Title IX when Patsy went back to Congress in 1989. So I could tell you my whole life story, because Title IX, I was destined to be the Title IX beneficiary at UH and to carry on the work, and the law that she helped set in place was my life work at the University of Hawaii. So I will stop there, but I can always go back and tell you personally how she impacted my life since I was a student at the university.
I'll jump in after Marilyn because I'm the next oldest. And, yes, Marilyn knew Patsy very well. And, you visited her on the Hill when Dr. Thompson took you up. And just remember that when Title IX passed in 1972, only 7% of United States law school graduates were women. That's how much discrimination was going on. Because of Title IX, I was able to go to law school. I think we all are beneficiaries of Title IX in terms of going to law school. And I will also mention that Marilyn was an inspiration to me because she was on the inaugural volleyball team from 1972. In 1976, she became the first woman to receive the Jack Bonham Award for the Scholar Athlete at the University of Hawaii. And at that time, they did not choose one man and one woman. It was only one person. So she was the first woman scholar athlete for the University of Hawaii. And then she went to law school. And I remember thinking, wow, there's Marilyn. Athletes can go to law school, So, Patsy and Marilyn were, and of course, Dr. Thompson were inspirations to me. So it was thanks to Title IX that I believe I was able to go to law school.
And Sabrina, there was another basketball player there in between us, Mary Kay Simpson. So we're going to give kudos to the inspired.
Yeah. Mary Kay was class A. She was class of 85 at Richardson. Ruby Hamili that I played with, she was my classmate at Richardson. Of course, Jill Nuno Kalkit went later, and then Trish Nishimoto. And so anyway, we've had a bunch of athletes going to. There's
Richardson. More basketball players that went to law school than any other sport, hands down.
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's good to know. I didn't know that statistic at all. I remember my mother campaigned for Patsy Mink. She volunteered for her campaign, and she would talk to us about her. And then we were living on the mainland at the time, so we drove to DC and we had lunch with Patsy and Mrs. Mink, and she took us around. And I just remember as a little kid, I was probably 8 or 9. And I know I had heard about her from my mother, and my mother was so admiring of her. And, really remarked on how unique and amazing her accomplishments were. But, as a kid, you don't really have a comprehension of that. But I do remember something about her that really kind of stood out is that I thought, well, she's not very nice. She's not like other women who are very, how are you? And it was like, she was kind of talking to my sister and I, who was younger, and it's like, well, what are you going to do with your life? It was like, I had never, seen, a woman talk like that before, none of this sort of pleasantry of, you have such a nice dress and your shoes, to a little girl. She was just like, you could be here, in DC when you grow up, and you could be representing, and you just thought, wow, lady, that was just striking to me. I don't know that I really thought about law school or anything like that because of it. But I was struck by the fact that she was the first woman I met who kind of asked basically to a little kid, to a girl, like, what are you going to do with your life? And she kind of talked about how she was a secretary and, you know, she didn't get to go to graduate school, medical school, right? Because she wanted to. And then she decided she'd go to law school and she was going to change things. And I thought, well, I had never met anybody like that before. You know, I think it just gets embedded as a result of seeing people like that, seeing women like that, leaders, and show that kind of leadership. It's not one specific thing that I think led me to do certain things in my professional life, but I do remember thinking, man, this is like a person like I've never met before. I mean, she was a spark. And then later on, before I transferred to Wellesley, I attended the University of Hawaii and I was swimming for the swim team. And Donis Thompson used to come all the time and check in with us. And then she came with us when we went to the national championships in Florida, and we'd be sitting around and she'd talk about, wow, you girls are really lucky. You know, when I played in college, you know, we didn't have like these national events. We didn't, you know, we were kind of scraping things together to do this. And it was eye-opening to us, I think, because by that time, there were 3 women who had swam for the United States on the Olympics that was on the UH swim team, or 2 swimmers and 1 diver. And so they had, you know, competed internationally and kind of done all these things. And she really kind of gave this historical perspective on how difficult it is for women in sports and athletics to be supported. I mean, we could see it every day, right? When we went to the weight room and everything else, right? In terms of what kind of accommodations were made for us and what kind of accommodations were made for the football team, which didn't go to the same weight room and so forth. But she really opened, you know, my eyes to all of that. And that's what's so important about this event and talking about Patsy Mink, talking about Donis Thompson, because so many generations go by and they don't recognize, you know, little Sabrina McKenna coming from Japan and, you know, playing on the women's basketball team at the University of Hawaii and looking up to Marilyn Moniz, being a trailblazer. You know, it's really important to talk about your stories, because just like me, when I was 8 years old, meeting Patsy Mink, asking me, what are you going to do with your life? I think these things are catalysts for all kinds of people. So I think that's what Patsy Mink's legacy is, being a catalyst.
I'll go last. Thanks so much for having me. I feel so honored to be part of such an illustrious panel. I was not an athlete. I was terrible at sports. And I also, unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to meet Congresswoman Mink before she passed away. But as a woman in politics, I absolutely look up to her. You know, I think she was a trailblazer, not just as an attorney, but as one of Hawaii's first female leaders, and somebody that I look up to. She very much is in a man's world, you know, and she served for me as a role model that, you know, women need to have a seat at the table. We need to be part of the decision-making process. We can't let others make decisions for us. And I think that was part of her legacy, at least for me, and also for many of my female colleagues in the House and the Senate. You know, a lot of us have pictures of Patsy, and her courage, I think, is inspiring for all of us.
Yep, a woman's place is in the House and in the Senate, she said. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know, all these stories that you folks share, as Suhyeon said, I had the privilege of being a Patsy Teaming Fellow this past summer in Washington, D.C., and I met several of her former staff members who told stories very, very similar to you folks, kind of recounting her legacy. And it was similar to Rep. Ichiyama. I kind of wish, you know, I met her. There was some overlap, but I didn't, unfortunately, but her legacy continues through the stories that we share. I'll direct the next question. And of course, we have a couple questions that are directed to specific people, but our panel, please feel free to chime in if you want to piggyback on anything that's said. But over to Justice McKenna, if I can ask, you mentioned your athletic career. In what ways did your experience as a collegiate athlete influence your career? And I guess to add to that, how has like the implementation of Title IX impacted that athletic career, and in what ways have you seen changes in women's sports?
Okay, well, that's pretty broad, but in terms of how it's impacted me personally and professionally, all the studies show, and it's held true for me, girls that do play team sports are more likely to graduate from college and get higher salaries and work in more male-dominated fields. And remember that 94% of women in the C-suite played sports, and 52% of women in the C-suite played sports at the college level. And so I think what playing sports does is it gives you so many different things, but social skills, friendships. I think it gives you an appreciation for diversity because you play with different people from different backgrounds. Obviously, playing on a team, you learn teamwork. You learn your place within an organization. You realize that, you might want to be the starting forward, but you might be the sixth person coming in at a guard position. It's whatever role that organization wants you to perform, you have to do your best. But if you want to change that role, then you set your goals and you work hard and you persist. And you also have to learn how to perform under pressure and deadlines, which is great for litigators. And of course, just as in anything else, if you're doing it, you're juggling, you have to learn time management. I think also playing sports teaches you how to not only win, but also lose with grace, but to pick yourself up and keep going. And of course, I think playing sports really does affect you throughout your life in terms of trying to stay healthy, trying not to abuse your body. So I think those are all important things. But I think in terms of, I never considered myself, I was never going to be a professional athlete. All those ads about how 90% of people in the NCAA go on to be professional in something other than sports. And I was clearly always going to be one of those people. But I really appreciate the background that I got playing. And in terms of how things have changed, as everyone was saying, when I was a kid, there was no sports for girls, no sports for girls. Remember when I started basketball in 1974, there was high school girls volleyball, but in Hawaii, there was no high school girls basketball league. And that's why I think I made the team, because I played in Japan for U.S. military school and for the U.S. military women's team. So I played in Japan, but the girls here weren't playing organized basketball at the high school level. There was the Kalihi Jets that Patsy Dunn, my first basketball coach, who was a PE teacher at Farrington, she organized an outside league, but there really was no high school girls basketball. And that's why I think I got to play. But now all of the girls are going to Kalakaua Clinic, Dennis Agena, who was my assistant coach in basketball, but, just fundamentals from a very young age, playing organized sports from a very young age. The level that they have by the time they reach college is so much higher. And then, when UH sports started, it started with volleyball and track in 72. Track was reinstituted in 1972 after Title IX. Then we got basketball, golf, and tennis. And now there's so many different sports, so hundreds of women playing. It is a really different, really, really different now.
Thank you for sharing.
If you can picture this, sitting in the bleachers in the gym at Kaimiki High School in May 1982, thinking about my senior prom and reading a book, probably studying something. And in walks the first volleyball coach, Alan Kang from the University of Hawaii, hired by Dr. Donis Thompson to start the very first team sport. There was no women's athletics when I was a senior in high school, but I was going to go to the University of Hawaii and be a teacher. That was my dream at the time. So when he walked in, he recruited several of us because we were the old, right down the road, right, from UH. And we were the OIA champions my junior and senior year and third in the state. And we had a woman as a volleyball coach, Miss Anona Napoleon, and who got her master's at the university when she was 60 something. She went back to school. But that was the state of intercollegiate athletics in 1972. There was none. And so we created, like Sabrina said, track and field, because that was Donis's sport. And volleyball, we had in high school, we had started that. And that's where Rainbow Wahine Athletics began. And so women older than me didn't have the collegiate opportunity to hear at that time. The ones younger than me all benefited from Title IX, which passed 1 year after I graduated from high school. And Donis leveraged Title IX, knowing it was coming down the pipe, and was able to convince UH leadership that we were required by law to start women's athletic at the University of Hawaii when Title IX was passed. And we had to have program. The men had a program, the women had to have a program also. And we were a little different from the academic programs because Title IX, and sorry, I got to call it the Mink Act because some of the few times I get to say Mink Act and people know what I'm talking about, to start a program there and to be separate. It's different. Under the Mink Act, we are allowed to have a separate program because under Title IX educational programs, you cannot have separate programs for men and women. We are together, and women need to have equal access to educational universities and colleges, which was the main purpose there. And if you're going to have that, you're going to have an athletic program. The men already had one for over 50 years. We're just 51 years old this particular year. But just saying a little bit, the three qualities that being an athlete, and I learned this in high school real quick. My coach, Coach Napoleon, taught us this. And it's always the number one when they say, what's the benefit of participating in athletics? And especially for women, it's building confidence, the ability to put yourself out there to accomplish things, to have a vision, to have leadership. And you can learn all this from a different way, but athletics is one of the best ways to learn how to be confident. If you're knocked down and lose, how do you get back? The other two, just of two I want to mention, because there's many benefits. The other one is competition. How do you compete? We were not taught how to compete. Some of us have that burning up inside of them, especially attorneys. Most of them are very competitive because we learned that when we started the Etebo at the University of Hawaii and all those competitive juices came out and I went, oh, and most of them had not had the opportunity to play. My class was older. We only had 15 of us that actually came from college, straight from our university days. Most of them came back. Boy, did I know what competition was when I watched those ladies play football. And I went, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. Right, Sabrina? All that energy and physical came out. So it's confidence, competition. And the last thing, especially when you play a team sport, is you got to have a strategy. You got to have a plan. You got to work together and you have to know how to combat. So strategic thinking and acting and having a plan is very important if you want to be successful or you're in an organization that has success goals in place. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel like we front loaded our athletes, so I should probably balance out a little bit by asking Rep Kobayashi a question. If I may, to Rep Kobayashi, I'm sorry.
Rep Kobayashi or Rep Ichiyama?
I'm sorry, I'm messing up my names. This is my apology. To Rep Ichiyama. My fault. So if I could ask, this is a little bit pivoting to kind of politics and being an elected official, Patsy Mink endured and overcame hardship as she entered politics, and as a woman of color, without the support of the Democratic Party. However, she went on to tackle gender discrimination and played an influential role in Title IX legislation. So as yourself, a state representative and co-convener of the Women's Legislative Caucus, what gender discrimination issues do you see, and kind of what might be your vision for legislation to address these issues?
Well, that's a great question. You know, actually, the Women's Legislative Caucus is still continuing to fulfill Congresswoman Mink's legacy through the Mink Act. Thank you so much, Marilyn Moniz, for calling it by its name. You know, Title IX was officially renamed the Patsy T. Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act. And here in Hawaii, where, of course, we're so proud of her legacy, we're still struggling a little bit with implementation. What does that look like, and what does that mean? And the Women's Legislative Caucus has, over the years, created, I think, a very strong foundation in our state law, because we've seen the Mink Act come under attack under our prior administration. And a lot of the protections that were in place for women, for LGBTQ plus individuals, were rolled back under the Trump administration. In 2018, the Women's Legislative Caucus created our own state version of Title IX. We wanted to make sure that all of the protections that we had would stay in place, and that we would hold our public schools, K through 12 and UH, to the highest standard, and making sure that everyone has equal access to education and higher education. Just last year, we passed another bill for the Women's Caucus to collect data on how that's being implemented, how our DOE, UH, and our public charter schools, making sure that they are being transparent in their reporting about Title IX incidents at school, investigations, and compliance. So we're still continuing that work, but there's so many other areas of inequality that we're addressing. Next week is Equal Pay Day. And that's the day where, in order for a woman to make the equivalent of what a man makes for the prior year, that's the day we'll recognize next week. So a woman has to work an extra 2.5 months in order to make the same amount as a man. And so we're still struggling with equal pay. Another big issue at the legislature too is childcare, access to childcare, making it affordable. Because we know so often for many families it's a burden, and trying to find space, making sure that they're able to afford it. And that, I think, has so many other repercussions for women being, in the workforce as primary caregivers. So that's some of the issues that we try to tackle, but the work continues.
Thank you, Ichiyama. My apologies about earlier.
No worries.
I piggyback on that a little bit by talking about legislation, and this question is open to any of the panelists, but just the idea of how could Title IX, perhaps, and other legislation be used to either protect transgender youth, or where there might be convergences.
I would just say, real quickly to that, our state law makes sure that we protect and are very explicit in that you cannot discriminate on the basis of sex, which is what's in the federal Title IX statute. But we go further. We say gender identity or expression. And we wanted to make that clear in our Hawaii state statute, so that we're not subject to the, whipping back and forth of federal administrations, and that transgender individuals are absolutely always protected under our state statute.
Yes, I think, as Marilyn said, Title IX does allow for sports to be split between men and women, and that's the binary world in which we operate. Obviously, there are some women that express concern about like scholarships being taken away and, you know, believing that it's unfair if someone was assigned male at birth and then is a transgender woman. I personally feel that it's very important to let everyone play sports because if that is something that's important to you, it's very important for your mental health. And right now we only have, you know, the system that we have is this male female system. I am reminded that when Title IX, when the Mink Act passed in 1972, at the University of Hawaii, I was talking to one of my law school friends who attended the University of Hawaii undergrad. Men's non-revenue sports, a lot of them were canceled. He was on the wrestling team and on the track team, and he had a half scholarship, and it was taken away when money was allocated to the women. So when we started, Marilyn remembers this, oh man, the men were up in arms. They couldn't stand the fact that, you know, women were now taking money that men used to get for athletic opportunities, right? So, you know, and in terms of the transgender issue, do you want transgender men to be playing with the women? You know, I was just watching this documentary that's on Hulu, and you know, there's the high school girls wrestling champ is a transgender man, right? Because they make you play in the gender assigned at birth, right? So anyway, I think instead of complaining about transgender women being in women's athletics, I think we just need more resources for women's athletics so that everyone can play. That's my personal feeling. And oh, by the way, Title IX, the Biden administration's proposed regulations are out, and I don't know what they're going to be when they're finalized, but the draft does not allow discrimination.
Thank you, Sabrina. So if I could follow up, especially on what Linda said about gender equity at our high school levels. And I'm glad to see caucus collecting data or making the law more clear. And we've been collecting data at that level for how long? And I hope that if you need an analysis person, I can come volunteer and look at your data. I am certainly willing to do that. Because I remember writing a letter in the mid-90s to the athletic directors and just analyzing some of their programs. Because one of the first things I did when I got to University of Hawaii Athletics is to look in my file cabinet. And in there was all the information. Thank God for the two previous women athletic directors kept everything. But we were not in compliance with Title IX at the end of the 70s, and we were under investigation. And it came out that we were not. We had to do the compliance plan because they've never found the institution out of compliance in 50 years, the history of the Department of Education. And we had to come up with a plan in order to comply 45 years ago. Of course, Grove City threw a curveball into that, and everything got delayed to the Restoration Act in the late 80s. And it was just great timing for me because that's when I came into the University of Hawaii in '89. And believe it or not, I wrote my Title IX, my second year paper on Title IX, even knowing I'd be helping to implement Title IX and enjoying the benefits that Title IX, you know, that senior paper, everybody, that we have to write, legal method, whatever it was. And at the very, very end, I remember, and one day, men and women will play together and compete together and compete against each other. Now, I don't know what day, maybe 50 years from now, and we'll be using technology to play, so the physical aspect won't be a factor. But the dream there was, okay, well, what if we played co-ed sports? We played together. You match teams up, like when you paddle canoe, or you play tennis together, or you sail. There's a female and a male on our co-ed sailing team in the boat. Things like that. Or you don't look at gender at all. You look at ability and performance. So you're going to have more women and a little bit of men here at where the times aren't as fast, and a whole bunch of men here, because that's the nature of athletics anyway. But picking up on what you said, I'm glad to hear we're going to do more at the high school level, because we need to do more because we don't have the information. One of my best sources is the Women's Sports Foundation, and it gave me an opportunity to go back. They did a report on 50 years of the Mink Act, and they have a whole bunch of things of what state legislators can do and states can do. You can have a disclosure act, you can have the reports and the data, you can have Title IX coordinators, you can have the training and the educational workshop for the board and parents and things like that, so they know what it's all about. And that's what I spent 28 years at UA doing, training and educating. I had to learn what it was because I didn't know. And all of a sudden I became Title IX coordinator, though I cannot be the Title IX coordinator because I'm in the athletics department, et cetera. And we finally got that Title IX and athletics coordinator. But you have to be open and transparent at the high school level. It gave me an opportunity to look back, because dear to my heart is my high school athletics too. And I think at the legislature, when you get the data, because the most challenging is the facilities. That is challenging. And I'm glad to see all the new softball fields, et cetera. But if we can conquer that, if there are any problems, I drive by, Kalani has a locker room. If we have schools without locker rooms these days, it's kind of unbelievable that still we don't have that. But I'd be happy to help, consult, analyze data, go down to a school, help, give a seminar, whatever it needs, so girls and boys can have equal opportunities in athletics at our high school level. And then Patsy Mink will be very, very happy. Her shoes won't click as loud while she's going down the hall, because you're right, ladies, and Keoni, if you remember, she was a lady on a mission. And when she woke up, that was it. She wrote all her notes down, and you could hear her high heels, just like many businesswomen, down the hall. And it was fast. It wasn't slow. And she never walked slow. Everything, there was a sense of urgency. And thank goodness for that, because we reaped the benefits of the sense of urgency every day that she had to do the good work that she did.
That's amazing. I've heard tidbits about her, and one thing that I found really interesting was that
he wasn't.
No. I guess a former staffer told me that because she'd be between Hawaii and DC so often, her schedule ran on Pacific time out of California, and I thought that was so smart. Like a lot of us struggle with jet lag and things like that, but to know that she's like operating right there in the middle and just keeping one calendar. Love these tidbits. Speaking of just trailblazers in sports, I'd also like to recognize a trailblazer. This question is to Judge Kobayashi. So Judge Susan Malway included you in her book, The First 15, recounting the first 15 Asian women to be appointed as federal judges. And so as a trailblazer in that sense, what advice can you offer for young women entering the legal field?
Well, I have to give kudos to Judge Malway. She is the trailblazer. As you know, she was the first Asian American female Article III judge, and that was in 1998. And then it took another 6 years for the second one, who was Judge Kyo Matsumoto in New York. And then the Obama administration came along, and there's just a ton of us, and including the first Native American female Article III judge. But I guess my advice to all girls thinking about law school or whatever their dreams may bring them is a concern about you see a loss of confidence in these bright, motivated young girls around middle school, and definitely by the time they come to high school. And I guess sort of circling back to my comment about Patsy Mink, don't worry about being nice, worry about or focus on, what passions do you have? If it's journalism, if it's, not thinking, will that get me to law school or will that get me to medical school? But really, because you don't see boys saying, I don't, I have to be very careful about what I choose. If I choose football or basketball or math or what have you, they kind of go for it. And that's the kind of spirit I would love to see girls do, wherever it takes them, is to have the mantra, perfection is the enemy of good. Because I think for some reason we want our girls to be perfect, or girls get the message to be perfect, to get things right, and boys are like, be brave, go out there, make mistakes, and I hope that's what I would like to say to any girls or women who ask me about law schools, like, go out there and be brave, make mistakes, hone your craft and go out there and do well. And if it means taking a risk in, sports or high school, taking classes that you're interested in, but you don't have mastery over, go for it. Because that's what's going to lead you into areas and find your passion. And once you're interested in something, like I wasn't, editor of the law review like all of you guys in law school. But once I started doing trial work, I just loved it. And, I couldn't work longer or hard enough for it. So it's to find people or help people find their passions, and go forward. So I guess that's what I would say. And that's going to lead you in areas that maybe you get included in a book by your colleague. No other reason than, she's brilliant and decides to write a book on top of everything else she's doing.
Thank you. And I'll open that up to the floor, noting that we have about 8 minutes left. If anyone else wants to share golden nuggets of wisdom or words to the next generation.
I'll start. Okay. So, Title IX, the Mink Act, it's non-discrimination on the basis of sex. And in addition to the issue right now in terms of the Mink Act, a lot of people are talking about transgender women in sports, but I recently came across a little podcast by Dr. I think it's Richard Reeves of the Brookings Institution. And this is something, as a mother of sons, I'm really starting to think about now too. When Title IX passed, I guess there was like 12% more men graduated from college than women. It's gone all the way the other way now. There's like only 41% of people in college are men now. And we see that a lot now with the Native Hawaiian boys and men. The percentages are coming down in terms of the men. This is something I think we need to think about. We really do need to think about. And he cited another statistic. In the 1980s, 33% of high school teachers were men. Now it's 24%. And the men that are in education fields to become teachers just keeps going down. And candidly, I thought I saw that, because I thought some of the things that my son did were just kind of like normal boy stuff, but the kind of discipline that he would get from the women administrators and the teachers, I just thought, wow, and so in any event, I think we do, in terms of Title IX, we do need to think about how do we get men back into school and college. I think that is an issue that we need to think about. But also by the same token, the future, the remaining issue in terms of education, obviously for women, is the STEM fields. only 6% of women graduating from college are graduating in STEM. So that's what we have to work on in terms of the men, for the women. But for the men, we need to think about how do we get men back invested in a college education.
Thank you.
I'll add a little bit to that. I know there's a lot of law school students that are listening in, and my advice would be to find a mentor. No matter what profession you go into, whether you stay in law or move on to something else. For me in politics, that has been so helpful. And I feel like that's a way that women can support each other to move up the career ladder, is just being mentors to others, but finding a mentor. Sometimes it doesn't always work the first time. You got to keep trying at it. But to me, that's been invaluable. And I think will serve both the person who's, offering advice, also the person who's receiving that advice, and it becomes self-perpetuating, right? When I first started in politics, somebody told me, and I was very young, somebody told me that women in politics eat their young, as in the older women were not nice to the young women. And I was surprised to hear that. But there was that perception, like, well, I had to struggle to get here, so you have to struggle. I'm not going to help you because you just have to struggle. And I've tried to change that culture, and change that culture in the Women's Legislative Caucus, and make sure that we're supporting each other, right? We're leaning in, and like that idea that, right, if a woman gives an idea, another woman will back her up, right? And I think we've got to do more of that too. So that's just my advice.
I wanted to flash my picture of Patsy, me in my volleyball uniform. It's so old that they didn't make uniforms for women. You had to custom make your uniforms in the 70s. And the only volleyball shoes we had was the 6 Tigers that the Japan Olympic volleyball team had in those days. We didn't have uniforms and shoes. And this was a newspaper article from 2014. Here's Donis and Beth McLaughlin, my teammate. But this was due to the rise of the Wahine documentary coming out to celebrate Patsy, Mink, Donis, Title IX at that time in 2014. And I just want to leave a little bit, and I think Leslie's right. The passion, may it be athletics, it could be music. I see the concern. I have 5 grandsons, everybody. I have no granddaughters. I had 3 daughters to raise. They all love sports. But 5 grandsons, and they're all playing some version of the sports because we need to support them, and they need to do the same thing, find their passion, get that discipline in. So I have some of those concerns when I looked at the stats, because I got to say, how many female athletes do we need at the university? What's their enrollment and all that? I'm going, oh my God, it's 60%, probably 56% or so at UH. I don't know if it's changed since I left, but 60-40 and 40 is the men. We need something more, 50-50 or what it may be, so they go on to higher education. So we need to find those solutions and implement that. And parents have to play a lot bigger role in helping and supporting our young ones to grow up with dreams and aspirations. And I just wanted to leave this last quote. When we celebrated the 35th anniversary, we did a fundraiser and we dedicated it to Patsy here. And this is when, and she wrote, she couldn't come to the UH and do the seminar we wanted her to come to, so of course she wrote a 3-page letter about academics and athletics. And the last thing she said, I believe that through dedication and hard work that men can excel in any field of endeavor. We must inspire our daughters and our sons to seek great futures and to dream big dreams. Title IX will make them come true. So I just want to leave with you with that thought, because it's really passion. What is your interest? What drives you? It changes. And I am so grateful to have the opportunity to go to UH, go to the law school and do what I did. I just can't think of a better career. Every day I get up, when I see a game, the men and women, the Rainbows play, I have so much joy and my heart sings, because really opportunity is the word. And I got to spend a lifetime bringing opportunities to a lot of people and a lot of good times to our great fans and boosters at the UH. So I'll leave you with that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for kind of your closing thoughts on mentorship. And as I said in the beginning, I'm someone who hasn't met Patsy Mink, but her legacy lives on in the stories that we tell about her. And so I see that unfortunately we're out of time. I've been requested to take a group photo of our panel before we end. If it's possible for us to smile for the screenshot. I think either Suhyeon or Sarah will take a photo of us. I'll go ahead and count to 3. All right, 1, 2, and 3. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Can I mention that I just checked and the Wahine basketball team won the semifinal game against Long Beach State, 67-62. Yay!
We're in the finals.
So
we're in the finals.
Finals, yay!
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Mahalo,
everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for such a lively and sentimental discussion on the legacy of Patsy Mink and Title IX. That brings us to the conclusion of our symposium. Thank you, everyone, very much for joining and for being here. We hope that you enjoyed the symposium.
Again, thank you to our fantastic group of speakers today. Let's hear it for all of our panelists and moderators. Feel free to use the reactions button at the bottom of your screen.
Please join us.
Thank you to all the organizers. You guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice McKenna.
Please join us in thanking our panelists. Professor Maxine Burkett, U.S. Attorney Claire Connors, Lena Alalay, Ann Teranishi, and Mia Yamamoto.
Judge Jeanette Casagnetti, Chief Judge Lisa Ginoza, Senior Judge Susan Oki-Mulway, and Chief Justice Mark Rechtenwald.
Kaliko Onalani Fernandez, Wookie Kim, Nadine Ortega, and Professor Carol Peterson.
And finally, Representative Linda Ichiyama, Judge Leslie Kobayashi, Justice Sabrina McKenna, and Marilyn Moniz.
Please also join us in thanking our wonderful moderators.
Courtney Choi, she was fantastic.
Professor Pettit Toledo.
And last but not least, Keoni Williams. Please also join us in thanking Dean Nelson, Christy, Dean Nakamura, Tracy.
Our wonderful advisors, Dean Murkay and Professor Levinson, as well as Heather, Julie Suinaga, our faculty support specialist.
Professor Pettit Toledo for her invaluable support and guidance. The John Van Dyke Fund, Professor Sherry Broder and Carol Monley. SEED, Office of Student Equity, Excellence, and Diversity, and the Student Activity and Program Fee Board for their generous funding.
Finally, thank you to our amazing Law Review team. This really wouldn't have been possible without everyone's support, involvement, and hard work.
And thank you for attending our symposium. We hope that, like us today, you leave inspired, hopeful, encouraged, learned, and gain some insight and new perspective. We're so glad you're here. On behalf of the University of Hawaiʻi Law Review, thank you for joining us.
And for those joining us on the West Coast and all the way from the East Coast, mahalo for spending your precious Friday afternoon and evening with us. Take care.